towards having some fun.
We are officially moved onto the boat, which is super exciting. And since we've been here about a week, we figured we'd give a little life update just before we move into our video. We put our house on the market at the beginning of April and we sold it almost immediately, which took us by surprise because it was the middle of a pandemic. So from when we put the house on the market to the closing date was exactly 5 weeks, which is insane. And all of this was during a pandemic when we couldn't get to the boatyard to do work. So we were trying to figure out how we could get the boat launched as soon as possible while trying to sell all of our possessions and move out of our house and get everything else we needed to into a storage unit. It was definitely a little chaotic. So we tried to ask for some help.
So we asked the boatyard to help us remove the old bottom paint from the boat. Typically they have a guy who soda blasts the bottom, and that costs around $1,100. But there's no longer a person around here that does that, so they had to quote us hand scraping and hand sanding, and it was 40 hours at boatyard rate. So you guys can imagine what that is. We could not afford that. So
yeah, it was really insane amount of money. So we decided to take that on ourselves less than 2 weeks before we closed on our house, in the midst of selling everything and moving into a storage unit before we had to move to Maine for a few weeks. We hope you enjoy the video because we didn't enjoy making it. This is the least amount of fun you can have with a boat.
About 10 years ago, we used VC17 as bottom paint. When we moved to Lake Champlain, we didn't need such a heavy-duty option in freshwater and started using cheap bottom paint. In case you're wondering, VC17 is not compatible with any other type of bottom paint. So in order for us to use the new ablative, we need to get all of it off. It took us about 40 hours of scraping and sanding, and needless to say, we were pretty happy when it was over.
We were able to finish all of the scraping and sanding that needed to be done before we left and before we sold the house. And then we had to go spend 2 weeks in Maine because we didn't really have anywhere else to go. So a huge thank you to my family, my dad in particular, who let us essentially crash at his camp for 2 weeks for Andy and 3 weeks for me, while we waited for the boatyard to open and for us to be able to launch the boat so we could start living on it. Andy came back a little early so that he could work on the painting and the rudder shoe.
And it was 95 degrees for a couple days, so it was not fun at all.
Once we got all 5,000 layers of paint off the rudder, we unfortunately found a crack. Nothing a little fiberglass and filler couldn't fix, but it still set us back a few hours.
I gotta wipe everything out with acetone. I'll wipe it down again with this stuff. I want to get most of the chunkies off with the acetone because this stuff's really expensive. Put new filters in my respirator for this. Okay, so this is a 2-part paint. So it's got like a hardener and then the base. So I think there should be room inside this can just to pour this one in. I'm just gonna do a whole gallon right now. I got a smaller pack I'm gonna use to do underneath the keel and the rudder later this week.
finishing up the repair to the rudder shoe. This piece right here before, that sits right there. And there's a pin that stuck out of here. Find it. A little protrusion on the rudder post here. And it was like half worn through. So what I did is I cut off the old part, drilled it out, and I'm tapping it. And I got this half-inch bolt. And that'll become the pin, which is sitting through this hole after I cut the head off, of course. But tap in this a little bit further. It's a half-inch, half 13 tap. Soap on it. Didn't have any tapping oil, so hopefully some soap will do. Mandarin flavor. Alright, here's the finished pin. A slot in it for a screwdriver. Small off center. Little 52-100 on it. It's a thread locker. Here's the shoe. Had to grind that out a little bit. Fits perfectly. To 100, hold it on.
The yard was kind enough to let us hang in the slings overnight so we could get all the spots at the trailer made impossible. And the next morning, we were able to launch and we officially have a home again. Next week, we make and install our new Dodger and Bimini. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with all of our latest projects.